The Queen at Beny-sur-Mer, the Canadian cemetery in Normandy. With her, Mr. Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, and President Mitterrand of France. To the north of Beny, the sea lies in the distance where the Canadians came ashore at Juno. To the south, behind the mourning party, the rolling country towards Bayeux and Caen. D-Day plus 40, the anniversary of the Allied landings in Normandy, the decisive battle of the Second World War. The biggest seaborne invasion in history. The Queen, President Mitterrand of France, President Reagan, all attended the commemoration at Utah Beach this afternoon. It was a day for old men to remember those who had died young 40 years before. It was a day for parades and salutes and aerial displays and parachute drops. It was a day when flowers placed by school children adorned the graves. And for ex-servicemen to walk in the sun on the beaches they had won. The Allies had had more than one plan for D-Day, more than one disagreement. In the end, they decided on 5 divisions landing on 5 beaches on a broad front to take Hitler's Atlantic Wall, from Le Havre in the east to Cherbourg in the west. Eisenhower and Montgomery wrote that in. The Americans landed their 5th and 7th Corps in the west on 2 beaches, Utah and Omaha. The British 3rd and 50th Divisions and the Canadian 3rd Division landed on 3 beaches to the east, Gold, Juno and Sword. Their first objective, Caen. To the west, the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions landed to make a start on the road to Cherbourg. To the east, the British 6th Airborne landed between the Orne and Dives rivers to protect the Normandy flank. The British and Canadians went ashore at Sword and Juno in the east, getting through Rommel's sea defenses, though the Canadians were stopped by the sea wall in places 12 feet high and the fortified houses behind. The Americans at Omaha ran into withering fire, officers lost control, the casualties were appalling. The Germans thought they'd beaten the invasion. For a while, the Americans believed they might have to evacuate, but there was strong fire from 11 destroyers, American and British offshore, and determined parties got through. Omaha was saved. The Queen, returning in the dawn to the Normandy of her ancestor William the Conqueror, had a long day on the far shore. In the town of Caen first, the first objective in 1944, then at the Bayeux Cemetery, and at the anniversary on Utah Beach. Tony Carthew followed her day.
The royal yacht Britannia at the very moment of dawn, 40 years after that famous dawn. Very slowly, Britannia was entering the Caen Canal at Ouistreham, where the fighting had been bad enough. Now there was the sound of applause from the French crowd.
Hey, Kwik!
They turned out in their dressing gowns at 5 a.m. just to see the yacht pass by. Under a hesitant sun, Britannia moved up the canal. The Queen slept on, for there was a busy day ahead. Actually, she slept through a significant piece of D-Day history as the yacht passed under Pegasus Bridge, captured by the airborne forces 20 minutes after the invasion began. Then to the city of Caen, which cost so many lives and a long month after D-Day to liberate. At 11 o'clock this morning, the Queen and the Duke were piped towards a momentous day. At this stage, the Queen's visit to Caen was technically private, since it did not involve President Mitterrand. The object was to join the people of Caen in celebrating their liberation. So she was simply greeted by the mayor and a naval officer. The people of Caen were in a thoroughly celebratory mood, quickly demonstrated. The Queen was quick to sense that mood and happy to join in. This was a time for gaiety. A time for sorrow came later. The meeting with President Mitterrand came at the British cemetery in Bayeux, and it began a testing round of such visits. I say testing because these places have a unique effect on the emotions, bringing the sadness of all the years with them. Queen and President, scarcely talking, walked lost in their private thoughts. Any other conduct would have been unbecoming. There are nearly 4,700 graves here. There's also a roll of honour with the names of over 1,800 men who have no known grave. And then it was time for perhaps the greatest of English hymns. Then the tension seemed to ease its grip. The Queen relaxed a little, talking to the veterans, understanding their pride, sharing the sorrow of friends lost, just generally being comforting. The Queen then went by helicopter, a form of travel she detests, to Utah Beach for the meeting of all today's heads of state. This required a trudge through the sand dunes, perhaps the best way to experience conditions faced by the troops of 40 years ago. The big thing was a parade of the nations, Britain being represented by the light infantry. The Queen had only the briefest of contacts with President Reagan, possibly because he seemed more occupied with the crowd. At Benny-sur-Mer, the Canadian cemetery, the Queen joined with Mr. Trudeau to pay homage to the 2,000 Canadian dead who lie on this hillside. This day of tugging at the emotions continued, each event having its own special significance, a significance just as relevant today as it was 40 years ago.
And now at Arromanches, the little harbour on the Calvados coast where the Mulberry Harbour was towed across to supply the Allied armies after D-Day, the Queen is standing at the saluting base in the little square, the square of the 6th of June, her standard at the top of the mast. And here she's been welcomed by the Mayor of Arromanches, Mr. Jean-Paul Lecomte, and by the President of the Royal British Legion and the President of the Normandy Veterans Association. With a small posy of flowers in her hand, she looks down upon the Free French banners, recalling the role played by the resistance and by the French fighters on June the 6th, 1944. The Duke of Edinburgh saluting, and there will be a march past now of the ex-servicemen, all who have come here today from all parts of the country, organized by their little groups, by towns and even villages who have come here today. The band of the Royal Marine School of Music from Deal is here to play for them. And here in the evening sunshine, a French village. It's no more than a village. Arromanches-les-Bains, they call it, a summer seaside resort, is playing its part and saying to the British, even to the Chelsea pensioners who have come over, that this is part of the Entente Cordiale, and remembering those days which have dominated the 20th century in which France and Britain have fought side by side. Now here at Arromanches this evening, there is a parade coming now down the narrow village street, past the little souvenir shops, past the bars, past the alimentation, coming now. And this is the salute that the ex-servicemen are giving to the Queen, and Arromanches is giving to the British. The Mulberry Harbour at Arromanches was the one that worked. The one at Omaha was blown away by the gales. But here at Arromanches, they survived the gales, they sheltered all the small craft, and they brought the supplies ashore, the armored vehicles, the ammunition, the food, all these things, which meant that the build-up of the Allied armies was now so great that in the end the German resistance in Normandy, strong though it was, would have to be swept away. None of that was known on June the 6th, 1944, when in fact the British troops coming from Gold Beach just took Arromanches that evening. What it did mean was that that night they could give the go-ahead for all the caissons, all the floating harbour that had been built, and nobody knew in the shipyards what it had been built for, could then now set sail and could be put in place in order to save the Allies and to build them up into an impregnable position. And there are proud smiles on the faces of some of them as they march by. Some wear the berets of the past. All of them have come here today to pay tribute to those who died and to remember the victories that were won. Well, that is the Queen at Arromanches. President Reagan, of course, has been in Normandy all day, too. He began at the Pointe du Hoc. Desmond Hamill has been with him.
The sea off Utah lay quiet this morning, the dawn wind hardly moving across the wide beach where the Americans had first stormed ashore. Then the day lightened to show the forbidding features of Omaha Beach to the east, scene of the bloodiest fighting and where the Americans had suffered so many casualties. And in between, Pointe du Hoc, where they'd lost more men when the Rangers climbed the sheer cliffs to find and destroy the guns which had threatened both their landing beaches. And where today President Reagan and his wife came to start their day in Normandy. They kept close to each other. Moving forward, to be shown first of all one of the massive bomb craters which still cover this whole headland, a relic of the massive bombing which had, unknown to both the Allies and the Rangers, persuaded the Germans to move their heavy guns inland. And then an easy walk and a quick smile across the ground where the Americans and Germans had fought so fiercely and where the Rangers had lost so many. Some of those veterans were here today to tell him how it was. A lot of this, of course, is for television viewers back home, and the veterans gently pointed out to their president the spot where he should stand. He obliged. He does, after all, know the form. And then they showed him a rusty grappling iron, which they'd shot up the cliff, trailing ropes they'd climbed. Then the president moved on out onto the top of the bunker by the War Memorial, where he used the opportunity to punch out a message beyond just those who'd gathered for this moment of remembering.
It's fitting to remember here the great losses also suffered by the Russian people during World War II. 20 million perished, a terrible price that testifies to all the world the necessity of ending war. I tell you from my heart that we in the United States do not want war. We want to wipe from the face of the earth the terrible weapons that man now has in his hands. And I tell you, we're ready to seize that beachhead.
Below him was the enormous concrete observation bunker from which the guns had been directed. It's a must for every visitor, however grand, and it is impressive. Some of the men who died here are buried in the huge American cemetery at Colville above Omaha Beach. 20,000 Americans lie here, and there was just time for a few semi-private moments at the grave of General Theodore Roosevelt, the first general to land on the beaches. And then President Mitterrand of France and President Reagan of America laid the enormous official wreaths. For the veterans, for those they left behind, and for the president, there seemed now only one message.
It is enough for us to say about all the men of honor and courage who we will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared, so we may be always free. Thank you.
And finally to Utah Beach, where it all started. The Americans parading their colors and battle honors under the watchful eye of their President and British Defense Secretary Michael Heseltine. They also saw a surviving Lancaster bomber, a Hurricane, and a Spitfire in the white band markings of the D-Day invasion. 6 heads of state were watching this demonstration, and at the tail end, a touch of nostalgia for the older generation. This was followed by a fine demonstration of precision parachuting by teams from all the countries and services represented here today. This is the British team. They were followed by a cluster of Canadians. And high over Utah Beach, a daring group of 4 standing on each other's shoulders. And finally, it was the turn of President Reagan and the other heads of state to go on parade themselves. It was obviously just a bit too overpowering a squad for the sergeant major type figure who organized them. A few Gallic shrugs, and he gave up. It was left to President Mitterrand to bring them to order. With President Reagan saluting to the end.
Elsewhere in Calvados, in their buses and their quiet groups, the ex-servicemen and the war widows, the widows at last recognized by the Defense Department, made their way to the cemeteries and the graves and the monuments of Normandy. For many of them, the bitterness and the sadness, not the glory of war.
They came back to Normandy, as they did that first time, courtesy of the military. But what a difference. This time, they came proudly off the plane, their medals glinting in the warm sunlight. They laughed and joked and chatted easily.
How was your flight over? Oh, it was very comfortable. A little more comfortable, I think, than 40 years ago. Well, yes, it wasn't so rough.
Oh, marvellous today. I really feel great about it. There was one thing, we had a little funny feeling. We thought they might be expecting us today.
We've got the weather. That's something we didn't have 40 years ago.
But it was noticeable, as their bus neared the Commonwealth Cemetery at Bayeux, that the banter which had flowed so easily at the start of the drive died away, and as the first lines of headstones came into view, the bus fell almost totally silent. This is the largest single Second World War Commonwealth cemetery in France, with more than 4,600 graves and the names of a further 1,800 men whose bodies have never been found. And this, behind today's ritual and ceremonial, is what today is all about. One man's search for the grave of his brother. But this was not only a day for the veterans. The D-Day widows were also here, many seeing for the first time the last resting places of their menfolk.
Burned to death in his plane. I couldn't have anything, watch or ring or anything to keep. And he's buried in, this is Bayeux, of course, isn't it? This is where he's buried. I've got to try and find where the grave is.
You haven't seen the grave yet, then?
Not now, not since this. I only saw, well, it wasn't a cross or anything on it, it was just stones. And I just asked somebody, there was an old Frenchman, I think, looking after it, and he said it was somewhere in the middle somewhere. I managed to find it after a long search, but I'm dying to see it now.
Some brought and showed with pride the last letter, the last picture. For some, the day was almost too much.
It's not a time for words, is it?
For everyone, there were different highlights today, but for all, one of the most moving was the presence of the Queen at a memorial service in the cemetery. 40 years ago, this was a battleground. Today, the survivors knelt among the graves of their comrades. As they left, they sang the songs their fathers sang in an earlier war.
Farewell, Websters, farewell. Overnight, the sky above Juno Beach lit up, just as it would have done in 1944. But this time it was colourful, celebratory fireworks which filled the air as Allied troops, including the British Light Infantry, dominated the streets once more. Daybreak found Britain's wartime commandos back on nearby Sword Beach, precisely 40 years to the minute after their invasion. 30,000 commandos landed here. Within minutes, 200 were dead. Wreaths in tribute to those men were carried to the water's edge today. The local mayor took over, pulling rank to escape a soaking. And as the crowd fell silent, the mayor set about his solemn task. Ceremony over, one group of commandos put their old square bashing into practice. Others preferred to watch as their comrades tried to revive former training. Some may have found it more difficult than before, but they all had time to recall wartime stories.
Well, the memories of that morning to me is something which you can never really describe. All young boys landing here and seeing that your mates dropping here and there, you know, and just getting off the beach was good enough.
For some, today was their first return, clearly an emotional one.
I've not been back in 40 years. Some of these lads come back regularly. For me, it's one of the highlights of my life to come back to the people that we were.
From green to red berets and the return to Ronville of the Paras, 24 hours after their official parade past Prince Charles. Today they assembled for their own private remembrance service in the village where they landed and liberated. For some, a touch of up-to-date adventure. Carrying old maps and photos, they plan to spend most of their time here searching for the wreckage of their glider. But first, the reason they returned, the memorial service to honor their friends and colleagues who never made it home. They, the Paras who never realized the full success of their D-Day mission, now lie in the cemetery outside.
By nightfall on D-Day, the Allies had got 160,000 men on shore. The British and Canadians had had 3,000 casualties, the Americans 6,000. That was high, though not as high as the generals had expected. Absent today, the German infantry who fought so well, and President Mitterrand was careful to say that Germany was not the real enemy in his speech at Utah. And both he and President Reagan recognized the efforts and the sacrifices of the Soviet Union far away on the Eastern Front. Normandy was not the last battle of the old sort of war, but it was the decisive one. After it, the Allies could not lose, and Germany could not win. That was what was won in Normandy 40 years ago. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
In Friday's Shine on Harvey Moon, Rita has lost her sparkle.
After what I've been through, I don't care if I never go out with another bloke as long as I live.
Harriet's engaged.
She's never.
Monty's back.
Lucky? Me? You must be joking.
We're all going to go off and live happily ever after.
Harvey, my dead buddy.
It can be arranged.
Rita's new boyfriend could cost Harvey an arm and a leg in Shine On Harvey Moon, Fridays at 9 on ITV.
Now, don't want you thinking that Yorkshire folks spend all the time supping Websters Yorkshire bitter. There's more to life than that, you know. There's pigeons. Amazing sense of direction, pigeons. Some of them. Thirsty won't mind with all them feathers flying about. That's why every pigeon fancier fancies a pint of Websters. Brewed with Pennine water, it always goes down smooth. By the way, ladies, if your men folk are still down at pub, don't worry, they're like pigeons. Always find the road home, eventually. Websters, genuine Yorkshire bitter.
Today, the Browns are off to stay with some friends. So are the Wilsons, but they're going inter-city. How are the Browns getting along? Obviously in a jam. The Wilsons are doing nicely. Looks like little Johnny had to pay a call. So does the little Wilsons. Pity Mr. Brown didn't know a train journey needn't be expensive. With a £12 family rail card, here's some examples of how little travelling by train can cost a family of 4. Now you know why I keep saying this is the age of the train. What kept you, Mr. Brown?
Because bricks tend to be very similar, a good many houses look like a good many others. Why are David Wilson homes different? David Wilson designed beautiful homes just right for you and your family. There's a wide selection of different house designs. Each development is planned to give you privacy, plenty of garden space, and attractively designed interiors. An individual home of your own. David Wilson Homes, building prestige properties from £16,000 to £100,000. Visit a David Wilson show home this weekend. See local press for details.
Not long before the sale starts, there's £1 million worth of savings at the Maples and Waring and Gollow sale. Don't miss it.
Need a new exhaust? Kwik Fit have Fiesta exhaust for just $16.50 and Marina exhaust for only $15.50. Our new price promise gives you Kwik Fit's best ever value.
Tear apart a Mother's Pride muffin and put an end to those dreary old breakfasts. New Mother's Pride muffins. Toast them. They're tasty and different.
Limara body spray. Now with 2 new fragrances.
One of these days, Vimto's gonna get ya. You'll be amazed. And does it taste? You betcha. So just check what you're drinking. Vimto will set you thinking how you can be bowled over in so many ways. We gotcha, 'cause Vimto